Carson Kvapil will race full-time in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2026, and Justin Illy will join Kaulig Racing in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and our Motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2025 Freeway Insurance Scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. This course being Daniel Suarez's final run at Trackhouse Racing before switching over to Spire. Carl looks awesome, did a fantastic job on this one. Looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2025 Aflac Alpine scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. I really like to look at this car, to be honest, and it's pretty awesome to see that Aflac is back in the sport once again, sponsoring in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's a good car. It does look pretty solid. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Almirola's 2025 Young Life scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. This is a much different Young Life scheme that we've seen from Eric Almirola than other Young Life schemes we've seen from Eric Almirola. But to be honest, I think it's a solid one for sure. I do like the look of it. The colors do look pretty solid. Looking for us on the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Phoenix purses for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Craftsman Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for that event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $12,394,135. For the Xfinity race, it's $2,151,939, and for the truck race, it's $1,160,400. This is up almost double for some of the series. Trucks is going up, I think, like 20-30%. Xfinity's going up almost $1 million, I'm pretty sure, from what they usually have. And for Cup, it's up, I believe, like 25% what they normally have every single week. It's some good purse money for this week, and the champion is going to get a ton of money this weekend for sure. It's some pretty good stuff, and I think the purse money is actually really solid and does look good for the weekend. Excited to see how much money these teams will make this weekend at Phoenix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IMSA. As was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, the NASCAR Holdings says that they feel that IMSA is in its groove commercially for 2025, as they had multiple events across the board this year. They had over 100,000 concurrent viewers, I believe, on their YouTube streams that they had across the world, and also were able to get over 100,000 viewers and sometimes even 200 to 300,000 for some of their events this year. IMSA is one of the fastest growing motorsports in the United States, and it's been definitely gaining more than NASCAR has had in recent years, which of course NASCAR does own IMSA. But I think IMSA, it's really cool to see that they're continuing to grow. I think IMSA does have a lot of promise and potential to be extremely successful. They're getting new manufacturers coming in. They're getting new brands coming in. You've got a lot of really cool, talented drivers and teams, and the Rolex 24 is not that far away, and you're probably going to get some big name drivers that are going to run that event as well. So it's some really exciting stuff. Pretty cool to see that IMSA is continuing to grow. I love seeing that kind of stuff for sure. Again, pretty exciting nonetheless to see that we'll get the chance and opportunity to see that series continue to grow, hopefully for the long-term future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Nick Lights. As it was announced yesterday morning that Nick Lights will drive the 28 for RSS Racing this weekend at Phoenix. The reason Nick Lights is behind the wheel is because Sam Mayer has been suspended from the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Phoenix after potentially wrecking jet burn after the checker flag had flew. You have Ryan Seegers driving the 41 car this weekend, and you have Kyle Seegers taking over the 39. So Nick Lights, who I believe has in the past driven for RSS Racing before, is getting an opportunity here. Now, this 28 car is not one of the fastest cars on the track, but I do think that Nick Lights is a pretty solid guy who can from time to time get the best out of equipment. Though I don't believe Nick Lights may have more than one or two top 20 finishes so far this year. But there's been times where this car has shown decent speed. I think Nick Lights is going to have a solid opportunity. Good to see him behind the wheel. Hopefully he has a really solid and really good run. It'd be good to see him have a chance and opportunity to do really good and get a good opportunity with this team this weekend at Phoenix. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about most popular driver. Now, NASCAR yesterday released the top 5 voting for the Cup Series so far on the voting for this year in alphabetical order. The top 5 are Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson. There's definitely some surprises here. Obviously, Denny Hamlin being in the top 5 is definitely shocking considering how much Denny Hamlin gets booed every single time we go out to the racetrack. But it's cool for Denny Hamlin, especially this year. It would be also really awesome for him to win for his father. Ross Chastain being in the top 5, that's not shocking. Surprising. Ross Chastain has a really big fan base, and a lot of people love Ross Chastain. Seeing Kyle Larson and Ryan Blaney being in there, not shocking. And seeing Chase Elliott there, I thought that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to get more votes over Denny Hamlin. The fact that SVG wasn't in the top top 10 or even the top 5 for that matter was definitely really, really surprising considering Shane Van Gisbergen is very popular on the Cup Series side. Nonetheless, it is top 5 voting for this weekend. I was shocked by some of the numbers, but I'm not surprised by some of the things I've seen. I was definitely shocked, though, to see that Shane Van Gisbergen was not in the top 5 voting over Denny Hamlin, considering how popular Shane Van Gisbergen is, especially overseas. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Xfinity. Now, last night, Xfinity actually wrote a thank you message on their Twitter page thanking for all the support that the fans have had to the NASCAR Xfinity Series over the course of the last 10 years since it came this series back in 2015. Of course, this upcoming weekend at Phoenix will be the final time that Xfinity will be the title sponsor for the sport. Obviously, they will still be involved in the sport in 2026, but instead of being the title sponsor for the secondary series, they're going to be a premier partner in the sport as one of NASCAR's top premier partners. It is going to be sad to see the Xfinity Series no longer have the Xfinity title sponsor, but the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series will be the title sponsor in 2026. Thank you, Xfinity, for putting on a really good opportunity, showing what good product. There's been a lot of memorable moments over the last 10 years. On a positive and sometimes a negative side, but it's going to be sad to see Xfinity go. Thank you for all the great memories, Xfinity. Again, it sucked to see you no longer being the title sponsor for the secondary series going forward into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, earlier this morning, Trackhouse Racing actually put out their own post thanking Daniel Suarez for being at Trackhouse Racing over the course of the last 5 years and thanking him for all the support he showed to them over the last 5 years as well. Sending a thank you message. Of course, we all know Daniel Suarez will be in his final ride with Trackhouse Racing this weekend as Connor Zilisch is going to replace him in a number that has still not been disclosed at this point. There's some rumor speculation about potential number changes coming for Connor next year. But obviously, we know Suarez won't be back with Trackhouse next season. We all know Suarez will be going over to Spire Motorsports to drive a number 7 car. Suarez, despite the fact he hasn't been the most successful driver in Trackhouse history, he was a driver who helped Trackhouse Racing get in the first place. So it's definitely going to be different to see him not be with Trackhouse Racing next year. Thank you, Suarez, for showing some decent success at this program. It's going to be sad to see him no longer be over there, but at the same time, it needed to happen with changes that did need to be happening for the Trackhouse organization and team. Hopefully, he can have some success, aspire, show some good stuff, and show what he's capable of and do some really good things. We'll see if he can have some good success and show some good pace and speed with the team and program, that being Spire Motorsports in 26. And thanks for the memories at Trackhouse for the last 5 years. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Marco Andretti. As it was sad and shockingly announced yesterday afternoon, going into the morning, that Marco Andretti announced that he'll be retiring from racing effective immediately. He wrote a statement that he's been competing in racing for about 30 years throughout his career. He's at 38 years old. He's been racing for almost 30 years, and whether it's go-karts, racing IndyCar, whether it's racing in the SRX and other forms in racing, he basically wrote a statement saying that effectively immediately I will no longer be racing going into 2026, as I'll be focused on spending more time with my family and building up some of the business I have behind the scenes. I gotta be honest, this definitely is really sad to see. Marco Andretti, while yes, he may not have been the best IndyCar driver ever, it's not like Marco Andretti was a slash by any stretch of the imagination. There were a lot of times in the early 2010s, especially in the late 2000s for that matter, where Marco Andretti was a contender, and he came very close in his rookie season to winning the Indy 500, only to get beat by Sam Hornish Jr. Marco is someone that I think is going to be iconic to the sport, and it just shows that we're seeing the Andretti name falling away from Andretti Global in general, because Michael Andretti is no longer involved in IndyCar anymore, and now you got Marco, who won't be in that number 98 car going in the next year. But Marco, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done in racing. It sucks to see you're no longer to be racing anymore. As for the driver of the 98 car next year for the Indy 500, because that ride's going to open up, I would expect Colton Herta to likely be the driver, as he will have some time off during the Formula 2 calendar. I know Colton said he wasn't interested in coming back. If not Colton, you could see Connor Daly get behind the wheel, since Marco and Connor are really good friends. If Marco still owns a part ownership of that car, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but it sucks to see that Marco Andretti is retiring from racing after being in the sport for a long time and showing some decent success, getting a couple wins in IndyCar. Thank you for everything you've done, Marco, and congrats on retirement. It sucks to see he's no longer racing again. Hopefully he can come back in the future and race once again in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Crafton. Now, jski.com put out a little bit of a memoir, basically putting a farewell post about Matt Crafton. Well, Matt Crafton actually kind of came in and basically said, retiring from what? full-time racing, I'm not retiring. So Matt Crafton did confirm in the statement that was put out by J-Ski, he says that he still plans to race in 2026 and in the future as well. Again, when this whole announcement happened that Matt Crafton was going to be retiring, he never announced he was going to be retiring from racing altogether like Marco Andretti is going to be doing. He just announced he'd be retiring from full-time racing and given the reins over to Ty Majeski to drive the 88 truck next year for Motorsports Racing. Matt Crafton still wants to race in 2026, and I would expect that he'll probably end up driving for Motorsports Racing in select races next year. For Matt Crafton, he will turn 50, but Matt Crafton is someone, and I know people have their thoughts on Matt Crafton and saying that Matt Crafton should have retired a long time ago, but at the same token, same time, we got to make sure the facts are absolutely correct in this situation. And again, when it was announced, we knew that he wasn't going to be retiring from full-time racing. He was just backing away from racing full-time altogether. He's just retiring full-time racing, not back away from racing altogether. So it's good to see that Matt will still continue racing. I get Matt's not been as strong in recent years, but I think Matt deserves a lot of respect for what he's done, being involved in the sport for as long as he's been. Sucks to see that he won't be full-time, but again, it needed to happen. He wouldn't be full-time, so I think they need to make some changes over there. He's been kind of past due to retire from full-time racing, but he'll be racing again next year, just not as a full-time driver in 2026, which isn't shocking and surprising. I think he's making the right call to back off from full-time racing, as he'll be almost 50 next year, but he will continue racing once again in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story in today's episode as we're talking about the Cope Racing family team. As they confirmed on social media earlier today that they will plan to return to NASCAR once again in 2026 and continue racing in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year. There has been a lot of rumors and speculation around this team potentially being sold to organizations like Nitro Motorsports, considering Nick Tucker, who I believe is one of the owners of this organization. He owns Nitro Motorsports, and one of the drivers who driven the Cope Racing family team many races, that being Lean the Honeyman Jr., is going full-time with them in ARCA next year with Nitro Motorsports in the number 20 car, which is formerly Venturi Motorsports, who got bought out by Nitro Motorsports this year. But it's good to see that they will be sticking around for the 2026 season. They are looking for a funded driver going into next year. There's some unknowns who can get behind the wheel. When I think of funded drivers, I think of someone like Chris Wright. Chris Wright may not be the most talented guy, but he brings a ton of funding and a ton of sponsorship. Outside of that, I could see someone like a Lawless Allen getting the chance and opportunity. We don't know what Lawless Allen's future is. He lost his ride, of course, with Venturi Motorsports at the end of last year. Really hasn't made a ton of starts in NASCAR since the end of this past year. I really don't know who will get behind the wheel of the car. I think there's some big questions surrounding who will get behind this car next year. But whoever gets behind the wheel, I hope it is a talented enough driver who can bring funding. I wish they would go for more of the talented guys and the funding guys at this point, because sometimes it could be a really bad thing if you bring someone that has funding but might not have the most talent out there. I wish you could have a driver who has a combination of both. But I'm glad to nonetheless see that they're going to be back racing once again next year. Hopefully whoever gets behind the wheel shows some good stuff, has a really strong weekend, shows some good stuff in 2026. We'll see who gets behind the wheel. I could see Haley Deegan being a candidate because she does bring funding and sponsorship at this point, so maybe her, but probably not her at this one. We'll talk about her in a little bit, but we'll see who goes to the Cope Racing family team, but they will be back once again in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about William Sawash. As it was confirmed earlier this week that William Sawash once again will not be racing this weekend at Phoenix Raceway due to unfortunately suffering concussion-like symptoms at Talladega Superspeedway. Once again, Justin Bonziner, who ran the number 18 car in substitution for William Sawash this past week in Martinsville, will once again be behind the wheel of the number 18 car. William will, of course, in my opinion, is making the right health decision for himself. William, we all know, like I mentioned a little bit ago, was involved in a very unfortunate crash at Talladega a couple weeks back. Connor Mosack, I believe, got into the back of somebody, causing a massive chain reaction and crash. I believe Connor was the one who came back across the racetrack and ran into William Sawash, and William Sawash would hit the outside wall hard. He was transferred over to a local hospital. He stayed overnight and got released around 3 a.m. Central Standard Time. Then it was unknown if he'd be cleared to run Martinsville. He wasn't cleared to run Martinsville, and now once again will be missing this weekend at Phoenix. A tough break for William Sawash because, like I mentioned in the video that I did, William has been having a solid second half of the year and has been showing a ton of improvement and getting a lot more speed. So for William, though, I think, again, like I mentioned already, he is making the right decision for himself because when it comes to his health and safety, among other things, I think you got to take concussion seriously. You want to make sure that your health is taken care of, and he wants to have a long-term career in the sport. William Swalch has probably 20 to 25 years in his career. He just turned 19 years old very, very recently, and I know he wants to continue racing long-term. So hoping for the best for William. Get better soon. His main focus now is to get better for 2026. We do have a couple months of the season starts. I think the Daytona 500 weekend is about 3 months away, which the Xfinity race is day prior to that. So he's got about 3 months to get better at this point. Hopefully can get better, get back on the racetrack soon. But like I said, William Swalch is out of Phoenix. Tough break and tough situation for William. We'll see if he can recover soon, get back behind the wheel, and hopefully if he does get back behind the wheel, he can show some really good stuff in 26 and continue showing the improvement that he did show in 2025 and can get better in 2026 as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. There's a couple interesting things that came out during Media Day earlier today in regards to Connor Zilisch. The first thing revolves around the injury that he suffered, I believe, at Watkins Glen when he had won the race at Watkins Glen but fell off the car and unfortunately broke his collarbone. And a big question surrounding Connor Zilisch during Media Day, is Connor Zilisch still 100% better from the injury? Well, Connor Zilisch actually revealed that he is still not 100% better from the injury suffered at Watkins Glen after falling off the car. And I think he said when it's colder outside, he actually feels it a little bit more. But he did say he's not planning to get surgery to repair the collarbone. He's going to let it naturally heal. I think he's got some metal screws in his arm, I'm pretty sure, still from the injuries. And he basically has those in there to make sure that his collarbone is back up. He says he's feeling definitely a lot better, seems like every single day, but he still can feel it for sure. It's something that he's going to be feeling every single day, which is kind of crazy that Connor's been as good as he's been this year, considering the collarbone at injury. Just his numbers this year in Xfinity have been phenomenal and incredible. The other thing, it sounds like he has confirmed accidentally his spotter for 2026. It is going to be Stephen Parsons. Steph Parsons, who of course is running this weekend in the Xfinity and the Craftsman Truck Series races at Phoenix. Stephen is a really solid driver. He has been the spotter in the past for Spire Motorsports, has spotted for other teams in Xfinity and Cup. He actually spotted for Ross Chastain this past weekend at Talladega, according to what Connor Zilisch said. So I think Stephen and Connor are good friends off the racetrack, I'm pretty sure. So I think this actually is going to be a really good pairing next year. And I do like this pairing in general. So I'm excited to see how Connor and Stephen are going to work together. It's a young spotter because Stephen is not much older than me. I think Stephen's like in his upper 20s. And he's like about a decade older than Connor. But Stephen is really not that much older than Connor super. So I think that this is a good move in my opinion for Connor. Hopefully Connor can get better from the injuries, continue to improve, get ready for next year. But unless we know that Connor's still not 100% better, which is unfortunate. But at least I also know for sure that Stephen Parsons will be a spotter next year, in the Cup Series when he goes to Trackhouse Racing. And his number should also be revealed very soon as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR 25 Creator Series. Now, if you've been on social media over the course of the last couple days, you probably saw a lot of people who had their thoughts on the first event of the NASCAR 25 Creator Series. And even I actually had some thoughts on this Creator Series as well. The goal of the 25 Creator Series was to bring a lot of the biggest and top streamers that aren't really affiliated with NASCAR to come out and try to bring an audience in. People like Tim the Tapman, Courage JD, Emaru, Agent from, I believe, the AMP if I'm not mistaken, Stable Ronaldo, Your Rage, Cinna, and multiple other big content creators like Ray as well, who are big-time streamers in the game. And it was supposed to be this really big event. But unfortunately, as many people have said, including myself, it was a massive and unfortunate disaster that really went, unfortunately, terribly wrong. They were having issues getting people in the lobbies. It seemed like no one knew what was going on. Carson Kvapil actually left halfway through, which I can't blame him after the big disaster that gets surfaced through this. It seems like every time NASCAR is a big opportunity to do something really awesome or really cool that could really move the sport in the right direction, every time it happens, it seems like there's some sort of cluster F that comes into play. And it's really unfortunate because I think that this could have been a massive deal. And granted, they're going to have some time to get this fixed because I think they're going to have more events coming up either next month in early November or early December. But they have got to get this figured out next time because it seems like every time NASCAR has a huge opportunity to make something big happen and really grow the sport in a good position, they squander it every time. and it's disappointing to say the least. And I hate this for NASCAR. I hate this for everybody involved. NASCAR screwed the pooch on their end. They weren't prepared. And I think that if you're going to have people that are going to do something like this, you need to have people who know what they're doing that are doing events like this. So next time they do something like this going forward in the future, they need to bring people in who know what's going on, who knows what they're doing, and make sure they have everything set up and prepared, because it was frustrating to watch. It was very difficult to watch. They rushed it in. It wasn't good. It was disappointing to see, and I hated the fact that everything kind of went wrong at this point, because to me, I think it was a big cluster F of an event. And I hope they get it figured out going forward if they're going to continue doing something like this in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Martinsville viewership from this weekend. As it was reported by Jeff Gluck earlier today, that the viewership has finally come out for Martinsville this past weekend. And according to Jeff Gluck, NBC averaged 2.35 million viewers for the playoff race at Martinsville Speedway on NBC. That is down from 2.5 million in 2024. Considering what we've been seeing in big drops in ratings for a lot of NASCAR races this year, this actually is not that big of a drop from other races. I think it's only down maybe like 1 or 2% from the race last year. Yes, it's down about 150,000 viewers compared to what they had in 2024. And the Formula One race actually did close in a little bit. I think the Formula One race had like 1.1 or 1.2 million. I think this year had 1.3 million for the Mexico GP, which is still a pretty solid number. So it got within a million of NASCAR, but NASCAR still is ahead of Formula One at this point. Do we want to see that number up 100%? But I do worry about the championship race, because a lot of times when you have the ratings down for the Martinsville viewership or the second to last race viewership, a lot of times the final race doesn't have really good viewership, and I think that's going to be the big concern for sure going into this weekend's race at Phoenix. Is a lot of people are really tired of this championship as it is, and I think viewership may not be good across the board for this weekend when we get to Phoenix. But it's good we finally got the ratings out. It took a long time for them to get it out. Usually they have it out on Tuesdays. They usually have it out on Wednesdays. It took till Thursday, like the middle of the afternoon. Thank you, Jeff Gluck, for revealing those ratings at this point. But the ratings are not amazing. Could they be worse? 100%. They definitely could be better for sure. If they do go to full season, maybe we'll see increased ratings, but I think there's a lot that needs to be done to get the ratings up in the sport. We need to promote having more race on NBC. That was a big thing. We need less race on cable and more race on broadcast. I think that would be a start to fixing some of the issues and problems, but at least we know the viewership is in for this weekend. At least we know the average, and I'm glad to see the average has been revealed. It could be worse, but it definitely could be better for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tyler Ankrum. As Tyler Ankrum confirmed during media days earlier today that he will be returning to McAnally-Hogeman Racing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series once again in 2026. While Tyler Ankrum did not confirm the number that he will be using in the 2026 season, many can assume, including myself, that most likely he'll be using the number 18 once again next year. Tyler Ankrum, of course, for the first time in his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series career, was able to make it to the Championship 4, and on top of that as well, he's had a career year in the Craftsman Truck Series. He picked up his second career Truck Series win earlier this year at Rockingham, but he's only had about 4 or 5 top 5s or 7 top 5s and 14 top 10s across the board this year. So while he's had a win this year and has had some decent consistency, he's been one of the more inconsistent drivers who made the playoffs. But unlike the other two drivers, Caden Honeycutt and Ty Majeski, who made the Final Four this year, at least Tyler Ankrum can say he made the Championship 4 by getting a win and showing some consistency, at least in the final round of the playoffs. I think Tyler Ankrum has been one of the more improved drivers in trucks. Since getting the McAnally-Hogeman Racing, I think the expectations are really low when he got this opportunity, because many didn't expect that Ankrum was going to be a factor. But in early 2024, he was a championship contender. He had a lot of strong runs in early 2024, had a great run at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, showed some really good pace at other tracks like Martinsville and even the road courses as well. And this year, I think he even improved on that. He had top 5 and top 10 speed, was one of the strongest cars early in the year, had a dominant truck early at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and I think that Tyler Ankrum does have potential to grow. The next big step for Ankrum is have multiple wins and have another year of picking up victories and put yourself in that championship caliber position. I think he is going to be a factor next year for a championship potentially, though the Truck Series is going to be stacked with a lot of talent, especially with the Kaulig moves that are happening and other moves that we're going to talk about in just a short little bit. But I think Ankrum has deserved this opportunity, in my opinion. I hope he can do a really strong job next year once again. Again, I would expect this crew chief, Mark Hillman's also going to be back next year, once again, with the McAnally-Hilgeman Racing team. I like this move. It's a good move for the organization, and good to see that Tyler Ankrum will be back with the McAnally-Hilgeman Racing team and organization in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AM Racing. Now, there's a lot of questions surrounding AM Racing going into the 2026 NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Big reason being is because the current driver of that car, that being Harrison Burton, will not be back with AM Racing in the 26 season, as of course he'll be moving on to go to Sam Hunt Racing to drive the number 24 car and be teammates with Dean Thompson next year. And there's been a lot of questions surrounding who will be driving the car or what exactly is going to be going on with the program. According to a report that came out by the NASCAR Nostalgia account earlier today, as a matter of fact, it sounds like the AM Racing could be looking different in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2026. And one of the rumors that's actually been circulating is Sigma Racing might be coming in and taking over the program in 2026. For those who do not know who Sigma Racing is an organization that has competed in the ARCA series. They've had some decent success. I believe that Tyler Reif actually has won some races for Sigma Racing in the ARCA West series, if I'm not mistaken, and has competed in the ARCA East series as well for the team and organization. I believe Catherine Legge made a start for that organization earlier this year at Daytona. Unfortunately, she got caught up in a crashing incident. And we've seen other drivers who've got behind the wheel, like I believe Spencer Gallagher, who I think is managing this program, I'm pretty sure. He's been decent behind the wheel of these cars as well. The big question I have to ask myself, if Sigma Racing's coming in, who's going to be the driver? Is Tyler Reif, who's making his Truck Series debut later tonight, is he going to be potentially the driver? Or could someone like a Parker Retzlaff get behind the wheel? Because there's been rumors about Parker Retzlaff being a potential candidate to go to AM Racing next year, though nothing's been officially finalized on that front. But I'm very interested to see who's going to drive for Sigma Racing next year if they buy it. There's also a chance AM Racing can stick around. There's a lot of rumors that they are going to switch manufacturers next year and go to a different manufacturer in 2026, which would not be a bad move for the team and organization. They're losing a Haas factory team support. If you do go to Chevrolet, you might still get that Haas factory team support. It might get that Hendrick support as well, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Haas factory team will have Hendrick engines in 2026, which could lead to someone going into that program and showing some interesting stuff. I'm going to be very interested to see who does get behind the wheel of these cars in 2026. What team ends up being taken over AM Racing if they do lose their partnership. We'll see what happens, but it sounds like there's a chance of something like that happening. And again, it'll be interesting to see if it happens where they do look different next year, and we'll see what the team will be looking like in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story in today's episode, as we're talking about Homer Friesen Racing. Now, Jimmy Villeneuve, who's the crew chief for the number 52 truck for Homer Friesen Racing that Stuart Friesen and Katie Honeycutt have driven so far this year, he was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio earlier today. And he said on Sirius that Homer Friesen Racing plans to run 2 full-time Craftsman Truck Series runs in 2026. He also said as well that the hope is for Stuart Friesen to return behind the wheel at Daytona in a couple months from now. First beginning with Stuart Friesen. Stuart Friesen was involved in a scary crash, I believe up in Canada, I'm pretty sure, was involved in one of the scariest big block modified wrecks I think we've seen in racing history in general, and unfortunately he's been sidelined from racing ever since, which gave Caden Honeycutt the opportunity to get behind the wheel of the number 52 truck for this year. Caden Honeycutt, though, of course, is not expected to be back with this program next year, as he's expected to join Tricon Garage and take over the 11 truck for Corey Heim next year. But talking about Homer Friesen, beginning with Stuart Friesen, I hope Stuart is able to get back in a couple months. It seems like Stuart is doing a little bit better. He said that a couple weeks back when he returned to the track about a month or so ago, I believe in New Hampshire. He said he was doing better and was starting to feel a little bit better. So hopefully Stuart Friesen can get back behind the wheel in the near future. But let's talk about the other truck at this point. So it will likely be the number 62. Who could drive for this program next year? Could we see someone like a Parker Retzlaff next year? There's been rumblings and speculation about Parker Retzlaff not returning to Alpha Prime Racing next year. And no daily downforce can be hit or miss at points, but they mentioned Parker Retzlaff. Parker would be very interesting if he got the chance to drive a 62 truck next year. What about Justin Bonsignor? They mentioned Justin Bonsignor, or Justin kind of said it's hit or miss about that being a potential possibility, but I'd love to see Justin Bonsignor get a full-time opportunity. I could also see Cole Butcher being a candidate for this ride, considering Cole Butcher has made a few starts in the Craftsman Truck Series now. Will race later tonight at Phoenix Raceway at decent speed at practice, I'm pretty sure. He'll be driving into 62 this weekend at Phoenix. I'll throw out a potential possibility. What about Corey Heim? Corey Heim has not signed anything official for next year. He's supposed to run some Select Xfinity races, but was supposed to drive for Sam Hunt Racing. That, of course, did not end up happening for this year unless they run a third car, which doesn't sound like it's going to be a possibility at this point. So maybe he goes over to a team like Halmer, races in Cup, and runs a full-time run with the Halmer Friesen Racing team. I think there's actually more of a possibility than people realizes, and I think it'd be a very interesting move if something like that, in fact, did end up happening. Not saying it's official at this point, but I keep an eye on this being a potential possibility next year, is Corey Heim could be a potential candidate to go to this team if he can't find a ride for next year going into 26. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens with the rides, and we'll see who drives for Halmer Friesen Racing in 2026. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Justin Allgaier and Sam Mayer. Now, what was happening, of course, we know that Sam Mayer got in the Jeb Burton, intentionally wrecked him after the checker flag was over at Martinsville Speedway, and Sam Mayer got suspended for a week. And that was a big storyline coming out of it. But Sam Mayer actually got into another driver that I feel like kind of got overshadowed, and he got into Justin Allgaier, who made the Final Four. Now, Justin Allgaier actually spoke on the confrontation. They both had a confrontation on pit road, where it seemed like Justin Allgaier was trying to give advice to Sam Mayer after the race was over, and it seemed like Sam Mayer, for the most part, was trying to brush him off. Justin Allgaier had seen Sam Mayer racing like an idiot throughout those last 60 laps and running into everybody in the event, and Justin went over there to basically tell him, because he used to be a driver for Junior Motorsports, he went to tell Sam, what you did on the racetrack was not even close to how you're supposed to race behind the wheel, and you definitely need to race a lot better, and you shouldn't be racing like that on the racetrack. And Justin Allgaier even says, even though he may not be a driver for Junior Motorsports anymore, I have the responsibility of trying to help people in the Junior Motorsports family get a lot better. I think Justin Allgaier is that perfect driver to tell you what's right and what's wrong. Sam Mayer, absolutely clear as day, what he did to Jeb Burton was absolutely wrong and totally uncalled for on the racetrack. And he got into Justin Allgaier apparently multiple times throughout the race, and was a big reason why Justin Allgaier ended up not getting a good finish in the NASCAR Xfinity Series event at Martinsville. To me, I think Sam Mayer definitely needs to learn. He's a very talented driver. We know Sam Mayer has talent. The guy won at 17 in the Craftsman Truck Series race with the GMS part-time team. He won a lot of ARCA races. He's won 8 or 9 NASCAR Xfinity Series races at this point. We can all say he has a ton of promise and potential. But the problem is there's a lot of times where Sam Mayer just doesn't use his head, and it seems like he's clearly not thinking in these situations and gets in a lot of cars that he shouldn't be getting into at these points. So I hope for Sam Mayer he can learn from this. I'm glad Justin Allgaier spoke on the situation, because I think Justin is a perfect guy. He's one of the best drivers in Xfinity Series history. And if you make Justin Allgaier upset and mad, there's probably a good reason why he's upset. So I completely understand the frustration and get the frustration from him, because I think what happened on the track was totally uncalled for and totally unacceptable and pretty impressionable for Sam Mayer to race the way he did. Glad to see Justin Allgaier speak on the situation that happened on the track. I think it's important for him to say something about what happened on the track, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, there's been this whole thing going around over the course of the last couple of years that Kyle Larson may leave NASCAR early and may not race in NASCAR after like the age of like 38 or 39 and may retire by the end of this decade. And people keep theorizing that Kyle Larson may retire early from the sport because he's frustrated with the way things that are going and basically would like to go having a big career in dirt racing. Well, earlier today, during media availability, speaking to media for the guys who were in the championship forum, Kyle Larson actually went against the grain on this and basically what he said. He says he wants to keep racing in NASCAR till he's at least 40 years old and loves racing at the top echelon of racing. Yes, he does love dirt racing, of course, but he wants to continue racing in the top stock car racing as well. He said his goal also is to have about as many wins as Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart, of course, is one of Kyle Larson's heroes. Tony Stewart picked up 49 wins in the NASCAR Cup Series. I believe Kyle Larson currently is at 32 career NASCAR Cup Series wins. So you'd only have to average about, I believe, 1 or 2 wins every single year to have a chance to tie Tony Stewart. And I think he also would like to get a third championship on top of that as well. I love that Larson's kind of going against this because, again, there's been this whole thing about Kyle Larson not wanting to continue racing in NASCAR and go carve a dirt career. And Larson's long-term plan is to not only go carve a dirt career, but also once again run the Indy 500 or get another chance and opportunity. But I'm glad that Larson doesn't want to retire at least for the next 7-8 years. So it means that Kyle Larson will be at least 2032 before he retires and probably will sign a contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports through 2032 because Kyle Larson also is in a contract year in 2026. And I do believe that Larson isn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon because I think he loves racing in NASCAR. He wants to win more championships, win more races, and there's nothing wrong with that at this point. Larson's one of the best drivers to race in NASCAR ever, always is a major factor and contender to win, has a really good chance to win on Sunday. He's won at Phoenix before back in 2021, had a really good car in the spring of 2023, and this is a track that Larson has shown some good stuff here before. But I'm glad to see that Larson kind of went against this at this point because, again, there's people that theorize that Larson wants to retire and go dirt racing. Again, that's clearly not true. Larson says he wants to win a lot of races, and I'm glad to see Larson will be sticking around the sport in the long-term and foreseeable future. Larson loves racing. I think that's the big thing. He wants to race in whatever he can get behind the wheel. I'd love to see him go do more stuff. Obviously, he unfortunately had that situation in Indy where things did not go well, and that's a big reason why Larson doesn't run as much other series at this point. He will probably do more dirt racing in the future, but Larson, of course, wants to be focused on trying to improve his craft. We'll see what happens for Larson going into 26. If he can get better, even if he doesn't win the championship this year. But we know Larson will be around at least for the next 7 seasons and probably even longer at this point. He'll probably go till in like 2035 or something. So he's probably got about 10 more years in his career. And if Larson averages 3 to 4 wins a year minimum, he could have a 60-70 win career. We'll see how many wins he gets, but Larson's probably going to win a lot more races in his career, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lane Riggs. As it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that Lane Riggs has signed a multi-year contract extension with Front Row Motorsports and will continue driving the 34 car for the long term and the foreseeable future. It was also announced and confirmed as well that Dylan Capel, who's been the crew chief for Lane Riggs for the last 2 years, will continue being the crew chief for Lane Riggs in 2026 and also in 2027 as well. The terms were not exactly disclosed on how long Lane Riggs will be with the program next year, but my guess is he will probably at least with the program for next 2 or 3 years, probably through like 2027 or 2028. Lane has stated publicly before, though, he does want to get the opportunity to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and the Cup Series in the future, so we could see him making his Xfinity or O'Reilly Auto Parts debut maybe in the 26th year, and may also get the opportunity racing Cup in the near future if Front Row does continue to race, depending on what happens with the lawsuit at this point. But this is a great move in my opinion. Lane Riggs, in my opinion, has been the best driver this season in the Craftsman Truck Series, not named Corey Heim. He's been absolutely a major factor, and he had a really good shot to win the championship. Unfortunately, of course, he did not make the championship for this year, which, let's be real and honest, he should have made the championship for over Caden Honeycutt because he was a lot better than Caden Honeycutt this year on the wins total and top 5s and top 10s area, and the only guy a lot of year that could keep up with Corey Heim on the racetrack. But with Corey Heim, like I mentioned, not expected to be full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series next year. It might be moving up next year to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Lane Riggs is going to become the favorite. He's going to have a lot of really good competition next year, though. We'll talk about Kaulig here in just a little bit, what that program is doing in 2026. We also, of course, know some other drivers coming in, like Brendan Butterbean Queen and Daniel Dye coming back down the trucks, and Justin Haley being in the series next year, and Chandler Smith expected to return. Christian Atkins sounds like he might be back in the truck series next year, more than likely. Other drivers could be coming in. Hemrick, you name it, will probably be back in trucks next year, along with people like Ty Majeski in the 88 next year. The truck series is going to be stacked with a lot of talent going into 2026, and Katie Honeycutt being, of course, with Tricon next year is going to be interesting to see what happens in the truck series next year. But like I said, Lane Riggs will be back with the program next year. We'll see if Lane Riggs can have a solid and really good year, and we'll see if he can show some good speed. I do think Lane will have a pretty good season and to be a very major factor. I think he'll have a good chance and a very strong opportunity to win the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship. I think it's going to be a fun year to see what Lane Riggs can do in 2026. I think it'll be a major factor to get it done next season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking a little bit about truck silly season. So the Daily Downforce count earlier this past week actually put out the NASCAR Xfinity Series what the lineups are expected to be for the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts in 2026, but I didn't really take a look at the chart because a lot of things are brought up, of course, on Door Bumper Clear earlier this week. But one series has had a lot of talking about is what's going to happen with the Truck Series on this silly season front for 2026. A lot of things, of course, are expected to be confirmed very soon. Katie Honeycutt, of course, is expected to go to Tricon Garage in 2026. Gia Ruggiero will be back with Tricon next year as well. There's some questions around the Kaulig program and unknowns on who will get that fifth ride next year. There's going to be one all-star truck, it sounds like, and a fourth full-time entry. Eka's name hasn't mentioned as a possibility for that, but nothing's been officially confirmed. But there's some questions around certain drivers. Let's first begin by talking about Toni Breidinger. There is rumors about Toni Breidinger being a potential candidate to go over to that Kaulig program. She could be part of that Gong Show. There's been rumors about that. She also could make select starts with the Dodge program next year. She does bring a lot of sponsors with her. She brings funding, though I don't think Toni Breidinger, in any way, shape, or form, is ready to get a good opportunity again. She has floundered every opportunity she's had this year. She's had a terrible season in the Craftsman Truck Series, one of the worst rookie seasons we have ever seen in Truck Series ever, with only 2 or 3 top 20 finishes across the board. It just feels like that she's there because of the cash and all that stuff, which is really unfortunate. But Toni Breidinger could also be going back to Tricon. It would not be a bad move to keep her in Tricon, but at the same time, if she does go back to Tricon, she does need to improve. Moving on, let's talk about Hailie Deegan. There's been rumors around Hailie Deegan returning to the Craftsman Truck Series next year. One of the rumors is that she was spotted in the McAnally Hilgeman Racing Shop not too long ago, and I think it would be an interesting move if she was to go there. Though I will say that she wasn't amazing in NASCAR, but maybe with her being a little bit older, maybe she will end up having a really strong year. But I would not expect her to have a really strong season if she does go back to trucks. She's better than Toni Breidinger, so I would expect Hailie Deegan to outperform Toni Breidinger, considering Hailie Deegan at least can say she has 3 or 4 top 10s and had a lot more top 20s. I think she had like 8 or 9 top 20s in her final year in trucks. Meanwhile, and like 10 or something like that, while Breidinger's only had 1 or 2 so far this year. So Deegan would be an upgrade over Breidinger, at least on that front, but Deegan might be back in trucks next year. Frankie Muniz, there's some questions around him. There's talk he might return to Rayum next year. There's also talk about him not returning to Rayum in 2026. It sounds like Frankie, there's some questions around that. Frankie may be getting an upgrade, might be going back down to the ARCA Series next year. May have Rhett Jones Racing, but Cletus McFarland continues to be brought up as a possibility for the Rhett Jones Racing team once again, as he's going to run the ARCA race for sure. I think Frankie would not be a terrible option to stay with Rayum, but it's been a struggle for them, and I'd love to see Frankie do better and maybe a little bit better equipment in 2026. And finally, Parker Retzlaff. Again, rumors suggest that Parker will not be back with Alpha Prime Racing in 2026. It's rumored that he may end up going over to Halmer Friesen. He's a candidate for that. There's a couple other rides I mentioned. I think Tricon's a possibility. Spire, there's a lot of unknowns and some questions around Spire's truck program. There's been rumors that Spire may be buying some of the Kaulig Racing Xfinity Series stuff for 2026, and he could end up being a candidate for one of those seats next year in trucks, or potentially with Spire and Xfinity. That would actually be a really good move for Parker's career, considering Parker Retzlaff at one point was actually rumored to be going over to Spire in the Truck Series for this season instead of Andres Perez. That's another driver, some unknowns at this point. You have Christian Eckes, who may not be going to Kaulig next year, might be going back in Ellie Hilgeman. There's still some questions around the truck silly season, but I will say I think there's a lot of big movement that is going to happen in the coming weeks, and usually we start hearing more about the Truck Series lineups here in the future. I'm very interested to see who will get behind the wheel of these trucks next year, who's behind the wheel, because I think trucks is going to be one of the more interesting lineups, as I think that's where a lot of silly season moves are going to happen. It's a big changes are definitely going to be coming for sure. Going to be very interested to see how things play out on the silly season front for the lower series in 2026. Should definitely be very interesting to watch for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now we're going to talk about the 2 new drivers who are joining the Kaulig Racing Truck Series program in just a little bit. But first, let's begin by talking about the NASCAR Xfinity Series program. Now, we kind of touched up on this, I believe it was on Wednesday, I'm pretty sure, that it sounded like Kaulig Racing would not be returning to the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series in 2026, as Kaulig Racing did put out a thank you post, thank you for all the success, 10 years of being in this series, I think 26 or 27 wins, picking up a lot of victories with drivers, of course, like AJ Allmendinger, Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, picking up wins with Jeb Burton and Justin Haley, among other drivers as well, who've had a ton of success with the program. But it was rumored that they were going to be pausing their program. Well, Chris Rice did confirm on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio earlier this week, I think it was on Wednesday, that yes, it is officially confirmed that Kaulig Racing will pause their NASCAR Xfinity Series program effective immediately and will not have that program at the end of this weekend, which means that for the last time this weekend will be the last time, at least for the next couple of years, that they will be racing in the Xfinity Series. Now, I will say this. Kaulig Racing is not shutting down the organization altogether. The reason they are not going to have an O'Reilly Auto Parts program next year is because they're going to be focusing on their Truck Series program in 2026. They, of course, are going to have 5 Ram trucks next year. And then, of course, they are going to have 2 Cup Series rides, which are expected to still be filled by Ty Dillon, AJ Allmendinger in 2026. As Breakheart mentioned in his video, also Kaulig Racing will not be getting support from ECR and RCR. That partnership will be coming to a close at the conclusion of this year. There was talk about maybe only going through 26, but no, they're going to be closing that partnership, and Kaulig is probably going to struggle next year. It sucks to see this news in all honesty, though, because Kaulig Racing's been a fixture of the Xfinity Series for the last 10 years. But at the same time, it's completely understandable. And the good news is, long term, is that Kaulig Racing is not going away from NASCAR. They're just leaving the Xfinity Series at least for the foreseeable future. I do think they will come back not too far down the road. I think people really want to see them come back and have success. And I think that if they get another opportunity, they will come. I think once Dodge gets the Cup, they'll be in Xfinity too, because Dodge will be required, if they have a Cup team, they will be required to have not only a Truck Series team and a Cup team, but they're also going to be required to have an Xfinity Series team as well. And I think you'll be looking at people like Brendan Queen, who could be candidates, who's driven for Kaulig Racing Xfinity Series program this year. But you look at it, it was inevitable it was going to happen. Now, obviously, there's been rumors about who might buy some of the stuff up. We've mentioned Spire Motorsports, I've heard, maybe looking to buy some of the infrastructure for Kaulig Racing going into next year. There's other teams and some other people that could be looking to buy some of the infrastructure going into 2026. I think it is certainly going to be interesting to see who, in fact, ends up buying the infrastructure, but it's the end of an era for Xfinity. It's the end of the era for the brand, too, with them going away at the end of the year, and it's the end of the era that Kaulig Racing will not be competing in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year, not even part-time. Disappointing news for sure, but again, not shocking, surprising if you've been paying attention. They will not be back in 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story in today's episode, as we're talking about updates on the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. Now, I was not originally planning to cover this story around the financial side of things, because I thought that we were going to be done with this lawsuit altogether, and there was talk about a potential settlement happening by the end of this week. But at the time of recording this video, around 10:23, 10:24 Central Standard Time in the evening, basically, we still have not had an official settlement sent out, and we still have not reached a settlement in the lawsuit at the time I'm recording this video. So once again, we're talking about the lawsuit, and there's been some interesting updates in regards to certain things in regards to the lawsuit. One of the big things is a lot of financial stuff. There's been some new stuff coming out, and for the first time since we've had the charter agreement back in 2016, a lot of the financial stuff actually did come out. Now, Bob Pockers and other people did a really good job laying out a ton of information in regards to that, and I suggest going and reading some of the charts that they put out. One of the big things is a charter agreement and talking about some of the payments. Now, when a lot of people looked at it, they saw, oh, that's how much money they're making every year. The driver's only making $5 million a year altogether, and that number is not very good. What a lot of people, I think, fail to realize is, while yes, $141,000 is the number on there, that is just the base pay. That doesn't take in to the purse money, which we got the purse money numbers that come out. The winner of the race, I believe, gets 5 or 6% of the purse money that goes out. So basically, the teams, they get a ton of that purse money, while last, which 40th gets maybe, I believe, nearly 1% of that, but the winner of the race gets 5 to 10% of the purse money. And then, of course, the base pay, the highest charter is going to get around, I believe, $20 million or something like that, because I think Daniel Cespedes did a really good chart showing the numbers, and I believe that Chris Bell this year has made, according to what the numbers are, around $16 million. Now, that base pay will go down a little bit, but that base pay is just what everyone minimum will make no matter what, if they have a charter or not. And I do think at this point, I think people need to make sure when they're saying stuff like this, make sure you get the facts correct there. Because I think a lot of people were kind of jumping to conclusions. Yes, teams have probably been losing money. It's no secret. Also, some of the information around NASCAR. Yes, they have definitely lost some money. There's no denying that. But the money was lost after they sold off Auto Club. They didn't lose $400 million a year. Remember, they sold off Auto Club and made $500 million off that, for crying out loud. So I think that some of the financial stuff is certainly interesting for sure. But going back to the settlement side of things, it sounded like there was a chance of a settlement happening. Still some questions around that at this point. I think the chances are of settlement maybe happen because NASCAR wants to settle this case. 2011 front row, Denny Hamlin's basically saying that they're not close to settlement. 2011 wants to probably take NASCAR to court at this point. Same with Front Row Motorsports. I think the best thing and the best outcome and the best course of action for the sport at this particular moment in point is to pretty much settle right now, because I think that's what I think the industry wants. I think there's a lot of fans who would rather this whole thing be settled in general than just take everything to court, because there's going to be a lot more information that's going to come out. There's some 2019 financial stuff. NASCAR was talking about going to Long Beach, having a dirt race in the Meadowlands, I'm pretty sure. There's just so much around this lawsuit at this point that I think is certainly interesting to look at, but I think for many fans at this moment, we're really hoping a resolution can be reached. We can get to that point where we can get a resolution and we can focus forward on 2026. That's what NASCAR wants at this point. They'd like to have that by the time State of Sport dress happens or later today. We'll see if a settlement is reached, and if we do have a settlement reached by the time it gets announced, we'll talk about it on the channel. If not, we might be going to trial. Hopefully we get a settlement reached, because I think that would be the best thing and the best course of action for NASCAR at this moment, in my honest opinion. Hope we do reach a settlement here very, very soon. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Carson Kvapil. As it was confirmed in a post that Junior Motorsports made earlier today, or yesterday I should say, that Carson Kvapil, in fact, will race full-time in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series in 2026 and will return to Junior Motorsports next year. In the video, they did explain that they have not announced exactly what the official details of the announcement for Carson Kvapil are and exactly how many races he'll drive for Junior Motorsports or what numbers he'll drive next year, but we do know for sure that he'll be in the one car once again in 2026. We already knew, of course, that Carson Kvapil and Connor Zilisch will be splitting the number one car in 2026. When Connor is not racing, Carson will drive that car. Carson is expected to run the majority of races in that car next year. People thought he'd be in the one car full-time next year. No, the plan is still for Carson and Connor to split that one car in 2026. It's expected that Carson will be in that car for 2/3 of the season, but there were questions if he was going to be full-time next year. It sounds like they have found a sponsorship. They're working on finalizing those sponsorship deals for 2026, and Carson will be full-time next year. The big question is, when he's not driving the one car next year, could he drive more cars in the Junior Motorsports camp? That is certainly possible. He could drive the 9 car next year. We obviously know the 9 car will be back on a part-time basis next year with Ross Chastain and Shane Van Gisbergen. I don't think that Ross and SVG are going to run a ton of races. Ross can only run 5 races next year, unless, of course, that limit is changed with the O'Reilly Series coming in next year. Shane can run as many races as he wants to, but Shane's probably not going to run more than 5 to maybe even 10 races next year. So that at the point that 9 car doesn't have those 2 behind the wheel, or Connor Zilisch behind the wheel, I would have to imagine that Carson Kvapil will likely be the driver behind the wheel of that car at some point. And then the 88 car is still wide open. Roger Krug is going to drive the 88 car, I believe, in 2/3 of the schedule, and then he's going to drive a bunch of races with Jordan Anderson Racing. He could also, of course, then drive for Spire Motorsports. Spire is expected to have some Xfinity Series stuff going in next year, so I think that's possible. For Carson Kvapil, I think Spire, like I mentioned a second ago, I do think that is going to be an option for Carson going into next year. I think Carson will likely be with Spire Motorsports maybe for a few races next year, but I do have a little bit of a theory. We already mentioned this about Roger Krug. Roger mentioned he'll likely be with Jordan Anderson Racing. One of my theories is that there's a potential partnership coming between Junior Motorsports and Jordan Anderson Racing. Jordan Anderson Racing is a team that wants to get better. While yes, they have ECR stuff, and ECR stuff in Xfinity is generally very, very good. Junior Motorsports is the fastest stuff on the racetrack, and they get Hendrick engines. And I think they want to get those Hendrick engines. Depending on who gets behind the wheel of their program for next year, you could integrate someone like an Austin Green in Junior Motorsports. Think about this. Austin Green, in my opinion, is a great road course racer, and giving him Junior Motorsports style equipment would be huge, because Junior Motorsports will prepare the cars for Carson when he's not in an official Junior Motorsports car next year. But I'm really happy about this. Carson Kvapil, very talented young driver, has shown so much promise and so much potential in the Xfinity Series this year, made the Final Four, and I'm glad to say they're figuring out the sponsorship so he can run full-time next year. He's way too good to not be racing full-time this season. He should have been full-time for next year automatically in the 1, but I understand Connor getting the chance because Connor brings sponsorship and funding to the table. But I think this is a massive deal for Carson. I'm just glad to see, like I said, that Carson will be in the series next year. Again, way too talented to not be racing. I'm glad to see that they got this figured out where Carson will get the opportunity to drive for JRM full-time and other entities next year. I'm excited to see how things will work out on that front going into next year. But again, like I mentioned and said, Carson Kvapil will get the chance to run full-time the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next season and will race next year. Good move in my opinion, and great to see that they've decided to go ahead and make the move to give him the chance and opportunity to put him in the car full-time and drive maybe some other cars that aren't just the JRM cars. Maybe a Jordan Anderson race car. We'll have to wait and see what that will be looking like for 26 here very, very soon. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story in today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Dye and Justin Haley. Now, I did a video covering a story on the channel a couple days ago, but they have Kaulig Racing has confirmed 2 more other full-time drivers for the 2026 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. They already had confirmed that Brendan Butterbean Queen will be driving full-time in a truck number that has not been announced, though some have theorized it could be the 8th truck next year. That's been a number that has been theorized for next year, and the 4 has also been theorized as a potential possibility as well. But we've been wondering who else will be joining the program in 2026. As I mentioned a second ago, it's going to be Daniel Dye and Justin Haley. Let's first start by talking about Daniel Dye. Daniel Dye's name has been linked to going over to the Kaulig Racing team for 2026 for quite some time. He's been linked to be driving that for that program in 26 since it was, of course, confirmed that they would likely be back and the Xfinity program would likely be gone. And basically, since Kaulig Racing had their announcement at the Daniel Dye's father, Randy Dye's Dodge dealership shop, it was pretty clear, very likely that Daniel Dye was going to be in this program in 2026. In my opinion, I think Daniel Dye is a very decent driver. He's not someone who's going to set the world on fire for you, but he's someone who does have potential, and I think he could be a decent driver in 26 who might be able to show some potential possibility with this program next year. But the big reason you probably clicked this video, Justin Haley. Justin Haley will be with this program in 2026. I really like this move. This is a move that I don't think a lot of people were really expecting until a couple weeks back when Justin Haley basically was confirmed to not be returned to Spire Motorsports next year, with Daniel Suarez coming in and taking over the ride in 2026 because Suarez is taking over the 7 car next year. Justin Haley needed to find a ride. But it's weird because Chris Rice said like 2 weeks back, I'm pretty sure, that they probably weren't going to have a place for Justin Haley next season, but then a couple weeks later, Justin Haley is available. But I really like this move for Justin Haley. This is going to be a career reset, and he gets to go back to an organization. Well, yes, they've never been in the truck series before. He goes to go back to an organization where I feel like he did have a ton of success. And I think that Justin Haley is someone who's extremely talented and a very underrated driver as well. I said this in my videos with the Justin Haley situation. I don't feel like Justin Haley really ever got a fair shot to race in the Cup Series. He drove for Kaulig, has some decent success, drove for Rickwell Racing, overachieved in that equipment, and there was talk of him at one point going over, taking over the Hendrick Motorsports car, but of course it did not end up happening, which is definitely very unfortunate. But I think for Justin Haley, this is a career reset at this point. And what this does, this opens up an opportunity down the road for him to go Cup racing with Dodge. Think about this. We know Dodge is trying to push for a Cup Series entry in 2027. They would like to have a Cup potential opportunity. Of course, the hybrids aren't likely coming in until at least 2028 at this point, but we know Justin Haley would absolutely love to be back in the Cup Series. And AJ Allmendinger, while yes, he does have a contract technically through 2029, AJ could change his mind at this point and retire earlier as possible. And I wouldn't rule that out as a potential possibility right now. I would not count out that AJ maybe or going down Truck Series racing. AJ probably like to do that at this point and probably have at least a little bit of success. And then Justin Haley take over, or Ty Dillon gets let go. I think if Dodge comes in, you will see Ty Dillon be gone and probably go back to an ECR-affiliated ride because, of course, Kaulig's been affiliated with ECR, and we know he'll be back with the program next year with them no longer getting help from ECR. I don't see Ty Dillon sticking around long-term in those cars next year, so I would think that he'll be a candidate for that. But the Kaulig truck program is shaping up to be very interesting going into next year. Obviously, Justin Haley we talked about, who I think is going to be a championship contender in the Truck Series next year. Then, of course, you have a couple other drivers in the program. You, of course, have Brendan Queen, who I think is going to be a championship contender. You have Daniel Dye, who I think is going to be a solid driver. I don't think Daniel Dye is going to absolutely be a spectacular driver in 2026, but I certainly think he's going to have a chance and opportunity to show what he's capable of next year, and I think he'll actually run better in these trucks. Meanwhile, there's some other drivers who are linked, some unknowns. We'll have 2 more trucks next year. There's been rumors about Christian Eckes going over to this team, but there's also been talk about Christian going back to McAnally Hogan Racing next year. Anything is on the table on that front, and I could definitely see him taking back over the 19 truck or going to this 16 truck that he's ran this year. But if Christian's part of the Kaulig program, I got to say they do have a pretty strong lineup if that's who is behind the wheel next year. And then finally, of course, the 5th truck. There's been a lot of names mentioned. Grant Infinger's been mentioned. Daniel Hemrick's been mentioned as a possibility. Tony Breininger's been mentioned as a possibility. Jeb Burton's name isn't brought up as a possibility. He could even be a candidate for Spire from what it sounds like. So keep an eye on that as well. But I think there's a lot of unknowns exactly what is going to happen next year with Kaulig on that 5th truck. But I got to say their truck lineup is certainly interesting. And you got 2 drivers minimum here who could be your Cup lineup. You could have a Cup lineup in 2027 or 2028 of potentially a lineup of Christian Eckes or Butterbean Queen or Justin Haley. And that would be a pretty solid lineup for their Cup program in the future with Dodge. Maybe they'll get a 3rd charter in the future on that front as well. So we'll see what happens, but good for Justin Haley. Glad to see he'll get a chance and opportunity to be full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series once again. And good to see he did find a ride. I think he'll be pretty solid, and I think he'll show some good stuff in 2026 with this team next year with Kaulig. So, that's going to today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get to more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How I think Justin Haley is going to do a Kaulig racing next year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what thoughts about Carson Kvapil returning to junior motorsports and racing full-time in the Xfinity Series next year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later tonight on the channel, we're going to have reactions to the NASCAR Truck Series race and talk about who wins the championship. God, Corey Heim, please win the championship. I beg. Tomorrow we'll have the Xfinity Series Championship predictions, reactions, please. Let Connor Zilch win that title and Cup qualifying reactions. Maybe we'll talk about the State of Sport address as well on Saturday on everything that's kind of talked about from that. And then, of course, on Sunday we'll have basically the starting lineup video for the Cup Championship race. And then, of course, we'll have the Cup race review. And then Monday we'll have a NASCAR news video discussing over the course of the last couple days. Get some of the end-of-year videos out and start doing some previews for 2026 on top of that as well. We've got a lot of content coming up. People like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisborne, Carl Roberts, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Ballas, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Kyle Larson, Chase Light, Ryan Preece, Cletus Vaughn, Dodge, Rambo, Brown, Barfini, Cam Waters, Brad Gazowski, Ryan Preece, and other stuff on the channel soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.